Man, this is different. I don't know what's gonna look like until I review the footage, but let's get into it. All right, so new DSLR should be much higher quality videos. It's gonna be so hard not to look at myself there. I'll try looking into the lens. Let's go ahead and jump on into this. So we have two characters that represent essentially polar opposites for the modern fantasy genre. We have one that is entirely character driven, and that is Tyrion to me. He is someone who embodies the new character driven modern fantasy type. And then we have Drizzt Du'Urden, someone who's much more about their role and abilities rather than their personality. So this comparison has a lot of different factors going for it I find very interesting. But let's go ahead and go over the 7 categories here. We have origin, development, role, interest for the reader, relationships, who would win in a fight, and of course the tiebreaker, who would do better in the other's world. Now for the first point, origin, we actually have origins that kind of echo each other a little bit. Both are outcast from their family and both are kind of put into a world that does not embrace them initially. Beyond that, the origins do differ quite a bit. Drizzt's trying to escape a race of people that are murderous and kind of monstrous living underground, the Dark Elves. Yes, they are highly intelligent and almost immortal, not quite immortal, but almost. And he disagrees with their way of life on a fundamental level, and so he goes to the surface world trying to find a new start after spending a long time wandering in the dark. Then you have Tyrion Lannister. Born to the most powerful family in Westeros and wealthiest in terms of connections, money arguably, and influence, the Lannisters are not to be messed with, but the dwarf is something that kind of stands as a half Lannister. That was not meant as a joke, it just came out. They don't respect him as much as the rest, and he is definitely put in his place within the family frequently. Even the lowest Lannisters treat him as lesser. That being said, he often is the best face you can put on the family. He is someone who, at his core, is just a good person, and he's done a lot to help improve the family's reputation overall. The effect of Westeros eventually gets to him too, and horrible things begin happening to our friend Tyrion. For this point, I'm leaning Tyrion, not just because he's a dwarf character, which is fairly original, but the execution of the discrimination and persecution against him is just more in depth than anything that Drizzt ever gets. And throughout Drizzt's story, he quickly overcomes that discrimination. Meanwhile, it's something that kind of leans into Tyrion's entire story and helps build his character. And the execution is just so wonderful and marvelous that I'm going to easily give him the origin point. Next up, we have development. Boy, do both of these characters develop in really different ways. Tyrion is kind of broken down and rebuilds himself throughout A Song of Ice and Fire. Meanwhile, Drizzt is someone who never fully breaks, but he certainly goes through some really tough times, and the worst moments he has change him fundamentally as a character. He loses the closest people to him, and the echoes of that loss stick with his character throughout all of the Forgotten Realms. Really, both of these characters' development is driven by hardship and loss and rebuilding from it, but Tyrion is just taken down to another level of destruction in his character. Yes, Drizzt has to pick himself up, but he never really feels like he's at rock bottom. Tyrion, on the other hand, is certainly pushed down that path as far as he can go, and I actually think George R. R. Martin's execution of his development throughout the series as well, it just outclasses anything we see with Drizzt, and I'm leaning Tyrion for the point here. And now we have role. Whose role is more crucial to the world they are in? I am leaning Drizzt here. Yes, Tyrion for the reader is incredibly important, and later on in the series his role develops quite a bit more, but everything he does to contribute to this world is really squashed down by his family or undone in some way. A lot of his net positives are stripped, and I think for the reader that's a crucial role to really emphasize how bad the other characters are in reflection to him. But for Drizzt, his role has that plus an actual important role in the Forgotten Realms. He's saved the world, he's taken down many bad guys, and it's all executed wonderfully. It's a good time for the reader. So when it comes to role, I am leaning quite heavily towards Drizzt Du'Urden. Yes, I know it's pronounced Drizzt. I'm not doing that. It's ridiculous. His name is Drizzt. Drizzt sounds silly. Next up, we have interest for the reader. This is who is engaging more, and honestly, it comes entirely down to what you're looking for in your fantasy. Do you want a character-driven, dramatic, arc that will kind of make you fall in love with this person, even as they do horrendous things, then you're going to go with Tyrion. Do you want the more action-heavy, skilled fighter who's going to kind of win you over with his charm and abilities? Then you're going to go with Drizzt, and I can't say one is better than the other. One is more of a drama, while the other is just more of an action piece, and neither of them is inherently better, so I'm just going to call this point a wash. Now we have relationships. This, in my opinion, is where Drizzt stands strongest. The companions he has in Forgotten Realms are executed across the board magnificently, and each one kind of challenges him in a different way, whether it's just bringing him to the surface world or having him fall in love or having more of a friend-rival spike up. All of these things do something to fundamentally change him throughout the series, especially his relationship with Canterbury, which I will not spoil, but wow. That really still echoes with me in how I continue to read a fantasy to this day. I really have nothing but respect for the execution of relationships in Drizzt's arc. Tyrion, on the other hand, his relationships are nothing to shrug at. He has absolutely awesome developed relationships with his family, other political rivals, and just the world around him as a whole and himself. But I am leaning more Drizzt on this. It has a really personal connection to me, and I think a lot of people will agree with me that just Drizzt's story hits you in such an impactful way as the series progresses. It's just that good, and I'm definitely going to give him the point for this one. Now we have who would win in a fight, and pretty obviously this one's going to lean very heavily towards Drizzt. You don't really need to go into this much further, but he is an incredibly skilled dark elf who has been shown to easily outclass the best fighters in his world, and so he's just on that next level. Back when he fought Lan, there were some people who mentioned the fact that a blind ranger had beaten him before, but that was when Drizzt was still very much so in pain and severely weakened from being in the sun for the first time, so I did not count that at all when going into his fight. If you look at Drizzt in peak condition, he is a fighter that is pretty much unmatched in the fantasy genre, at least when you're talking about human-ish fighters. He's just on that level, so I'm going to go ahead and give him the point for who would win in a fight. Now we have who would do better in the other's world. This is tricky because Drizzt certainly has more direct tools at his disposal. He's able to probably beat anybody in Westeros in a fight, no problem. That being said, he's going to get in a lot of fights. He's going to be constantly questioned and harassed, and they've never seen an elf. His skin is not black like a black man's. His skin is black in the series, sometimes also described as having purplish tinges to it, but he does not look human in complexion almost at all. He's very much so an otherworldly looking figure, and I think many people in Westeros would assume an evil one. It would be hard for him to win anyone over. Could he find friends eventually? Yes. I don't know what kind of impact it would have on him, kind of being forced into a more primal living like he has before. This is certainly something that has impacted Drizzt in negative ways. Meanwhile, Tyrion in the Forgotten Realms, I think, would have a leg up. One, people like him are more common, and two, he's just so smart, and it's just not nearly as harsh a world as he's used to. I think he would be able to flourish based off his intellect. He's someone who is smart, and as long as he struck up with a good group of people, he could really contribute in terms of his wisdom he could bring to the group. It just comes down to who's more at risk, who would actually kind of thrive more. I have a hard time believing anyone would really thrive in Westeros with the level of depravity and just misery that world is shown to just be host to. It's really hard to really get behind anybody having a good time there. Meanwhile, Tyrion going to this world where I think he'd be more accepted, his intelligence would help him, and unless he goes looking for a fight, it'd be much less likely to find him. I'm going to go ahead and give him the tiebreaker, but the overall victory still goes to Drizzt Du'Urden. This fight is a clear example of how this tournament is flawed. I do think fundamentally Tyrion is a better character than Drizzt, but yes, this is a bracket based off of weird points that I just kind of came up with, some of which you all helped me get into the tournament as well, and it's really just more of an excuse to talk about these wonderful characters. This is not a definitive statement that Drizzt is better than Tyrion. I just want to make that clear. It's more just a fun time to discuss characters we love, and to the people who continually get upset in the comments and insist on yelling at me, noted. I just don't really get how people can get so upset about someone's opinion about a fictional character. I have really enjoyed getting to know this DSLR a little bit, and I will get better at looking into the lens and hopefully getting the sound set up the best way possible. I think it's still set up here right, but it might not be optimized. Have a good one, y'all. Like and subscribe if you're not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support the channel and what I do here and help me get better lights next time. Have a good one, y'all. Peace.